Not likely.
So you got the 2012 Jobs Act. It had 3 or 4 titles relating to equity crowdfunding. Title 2 is excellent. This is lifting the ban on general solicitation of accredited investors. That is a huge change. There's about 8.7 million accredited investors in America, but the majority of them don't invest in private placements. I think there's only around 400,000 that regularly do, or something like that. Fortunately, I cannot tell you where I got that stat from, but I heard it somewhere. And now that you're allowed to do general solicitation, the way that it's working is they're doing it through funneling them to their crowdfunding websites, and they're doing a self-certification process on the website. So if you go to their website and you want to view the offerings that are being offered online of these private companies, you go to register and they say, do you make, and by the way, an accredited investor is an individual who makes $200,000 a year or is worth $1 million in net worth excluding their personal residence. Then there's another higher number if you're married, but I don't know that off the top of my head.
300.
300,000? Yeah. And so you go to the website, you register, and it says self-certified. Do you make 200,000? Do you have a net worth of this? You know, under perjury of law, are you telling the truth? And then you do that, you give them your information, and you're registered. Before anyone can invest, of course, they do another form of due diligence. There's companies out there that are being created just to do due diligence on accredited investor certification. And so you'll have to get tax returns and all your personal financial statements and accounting opinions and all those things. But it's amazing because to invest, you have to be an accredited investor. But to bring a startup to these websites, you don't. To be a startup, you could bring your business, if you have a great business plan, to these websites who have a database of accredited investors who are crowdfunding companies. One of the biggest ones out there is AngelList. How many of you are familiar with AngelList? I mean, they're basically building syndicates online with lead investors or lead personalities, and they're implicitly giving these lead personalities the authority to make investment decisions for them. It's pretty powerful. Real estate crowdfunding, though, is going to be huge, and I'll tell you about that in a little bit. But right now, the Hard Rock Hotel in Miami is being crowdfunded on realtymogul.com for accredited investors. They're refinancing some sort of mortgage, and they're doing it through accredited investor crowdfunding. And the beauty is, not only are you earning interest on your debt, but they're giving you perks at the hotel, so you could bring your buddies in and, hey, this is my hotel, come on into the VIP lounge, whatever the case may be. So another piece of this, which is the really exciting piece in my opinion, is Title III. Since 1933, when the Great Depression occurred, the Securities and Exchange Act said you must be an accredited investor in order to invest in a private company. They said that because there was extreme risk at the time. People were losing their shirts. They said wealthy individuals are maybe not smarter, but they're able to afford to lose money. Flash forward to 2012, you have the internet age where information is at our fingertips. We have more information today than at any time in history. Supposedly the American public is smarter today as well. But not only do you have the information age, but you have the wisdom of the crowd, is what they call it. As noted in a lot of campaigns, the crowd is pointing out flaws in people's business plans. And the great thing about what this equity is going to do is it's all going to be done through crowdfunding websites. It's all going to be done through an offering page and a link. So if anyone raises capital online for an equity investment, there is a comment section that's going to be there for anyone to see, full transparency, and people are going to ask some tough questions. If the business owner cannot answer those tough questions, then that's a red flag for any of the other members of the crowd. So just so you guys know, like, some safeguards. There's the wisdom of the crowd. There's information on the internet, and there's also the caps to the investors. So Title III is allowing for general solicitation of unaccredited investors, meaning instead of only 8.7 million people in America who can invest currently in private companies, they're expanding that to the U.S. population, 300 million. So anyone, regardless of income, can now invest in a private company as soon as the Securities and Exchange Commission finalizes the rules. The caps are, if you make under $100,000 a year, you can invest $2,000 or up to 5% of your income, which is $5,000. If you make over $100,000 a year, you can invest 10% of your income up to an annual cap of $100,000. For a business, it's only limited to $1 million a year that you can raise as an entrepreneur, as an issuer. The regulations were 585 pages long, so there's a lot of safeguards. Registration with SEC, registration with FINRA if you're a broker-dealer funding portal. And actually a lot of people are saying, because of how much regulation, it might cost even $20,000 for someone to even go through this process because of all the compliance, legal, and all these things. So if you're only trying to raise 30 grand, this option is not going to work for you. If you're trying to raise more than that, it will. But it's probably not going to be, the original intent was for small businesses. The guy who's trying to raise 30,000 will not be able to do this, unfortunately. Title IV is another interesting one. So, has anyone ever heard of this old regulation in the Securities Exchange Commission called Regulation A? I wasn't too familiar with it until a real estate company called Fundrise.com, crowdfunding site, was using it. But apparently, you can actually generally solicit under Regulation A, which is out right now, to unaccredited investors. But the problem is, it is a state-by-state regulatory environment where if you have an investor from Connecticut and an investor from New York, the offering has to get approved by the state regulators, and you have to get offering documents across different jurisdictions. So it takes forever to do because, most people it wasn't used because before technology, it was just impractical to even go through the process. Fundrise, however, technology is creating it so that their technology is making it easier to happen. Title IV, however, is removing I believe it's called the blue sky laws, where you have to go state by state. Is that right? Like, are the blue sky laws saying if there's no blue sky, that means you can go anywhere, right?
Blue sky just refers to state securities.
Yeah, so it's saying, absolutely. So they might remove that, which would make Title IV even more exciting than Title III. I just now I'm reading about it because it just got released for public comment about a couple months ago. And I'm meeting with an attorney actually to really understand it better. But Title IV might be an even bigger opportunity because it's moving that limit up to potentially 50 million that you can raise this way instead of just the 1 million that Title III is doing. So debt, same as equity, same regulations, except instead of buying a share in a company, you're loaning them money. Patchaland.com is a real estate crowdfunding platform just for debt. Lending Club, as you guys know, that's a huge platform where it's peer-to-peer lending. And then circle up some more. Another interesting thing is the royalty crowdfunding model. So they're giving people loans in exchange for a percentage of their revenues as the repayment terms. So for an early stage startup who may not be making a lot of income initially, this might be a good option because if they're only making $10,000 a year and the royalty is 10%, they only got to pay $1,000, but the loan might be for much greater than that. And then for investors, if the startup expands greatly, then suddenly they're getting a huge percentage in royalties. So it's another great model. So before I go on to problems that Reality Crowd TV solves in my business model, does anyone have any questions on anything that we just went over?
How
Yes.
about Canadian, like Toronto or Indian nations? Are there rules for them? Can they make their own rules?
So are you talking about, are they going through a global kind of like, is regulation going through their companies?
Well, right now everybody looks at the SEC, but if you're in Toronto, do you need to comply with SEC kind of stuff? Can you? Oh, we're in Canada. We have our own program.
You would have to comply. If you're trying to raise capital in the U.S., you have to comply with U.S.-based regulations. However, if you're doing a Kickstarter or Indiegogo, there's like no regulation in the rewards-based model. That's why I think most startups should always start there. If your company is a consumer product, just do the Kickstarter and Indiegogo model. Don't go for equity. Start at the proof of concept model of Kickstarter and Indiegogo before you ever consider doing this.
Actually, if you're a Canadian company, you couldn't use Title III because Title III is limited to U.S. companies in D.C. and
Yes.
yeah.
Yes, that's true too. What I will say, I got a call from a gentleman out of Panama who has a land deal for a mango farm, and I introduced him to some investors. So Title II, accredited investor, you could technically raise money for a foreign investment. There's going to be funding portals that figure that out, whether it's through the EB-5 visa program, which essentially you could, as a foreign investor, you could invest in the US $500,000 in the EB-5 program, and they're going to give you a visa in exchange. It's kind of BS. I mean, that's kind of scary. But yes.
So go back to the like the Indiegogo model.
Yes.
If you were talking, so you talked about how it's important to get 30% of the funding in the first week, because you get, the people are writing you up and you get all the kind of a buzz, if you will. But what if you're, let's say, yesterday I met with a bakery down in Brantford, and she needs $30,000. She's not looking for all this buzz, she just needs $30,000, and she's willing to give a reward. How do you successfully navigate that model? Or how do you successfully leverage something like an Indiegogo just to get, $20,000 or $30,000, because you may not make it on the front page?
That's a great question, and I have my answer to that. But what I think too is she probably has a great story. What's amazing about the Indiegogo and Kickstarter model is you're physically creating a video to kind of tell the story. Like, who is this person? How much has she done on her own without the money so far? What can she do with the money? Can she create jobs with that money? If you could paint a story, the beautiful thing about Kickstarter and Indiegogo is people want to feel like they're part of something. They want to feel like they're helping something and they're providing meaning to someone's lives. So in that model, you could come up with an innovative reward, right? Maybe she offers a loyalty program as one of the rewards. Maybe she offers discounts like a founding member. Of course, you can offer trinkets like a shirt or some little trinket to entice people to do it.
Free cupcakes.
Free cupcakes, yeah, free cupcakes for a year, whatever the case may be. Provide an experience as a reward. Maybe she can have, at the $1,000 level, you're invited to the grand opening party, invite only,
I would imagine it would have to be something like a cross between Groupon and Kickstarter, right? Because you're not going to get funding from California because the cupcake's going to be stale by the time it gets there. So
Well, she, in this
it'd have to be a
particular case,
regional-
that's a good point, but
Yeah.
let me just, she's actually a commercial baker. She does a gluten-free product, it's got mass distribution.
Oh,
But
awesome.
as her business is growing, and as most, her business is growing at a rate that is significantly greater than what she expected. So she's in a position where just her working capital needs are far less than what she envisioned. So she's now sitting back saying, what do I do? But-
Small Business Development Center.
Turns out there was
Yeah.
a
That's
story
That's Emily.
related to this in
That's
NPR
Emily.
just
That's Emily.
yesterday.
Call
And
Emily.
actually, they were focusing on a bakery. I think they were in Seattle or someplace, and they needed a trailer so they could expand and go around the community. So there's a community-based crowdfunding resource. I forget the name of the company, but if you look on NPR, the story is probably still there. The word that was coined for the investors who do this are called square holders, as opposed to shareholders. And they say, well, it's kind of a play on words because the town square mentality is just keeping a resource in the community. So that might be something for this individual to look at.
And the best advice would be, have her go on Indiegogo or Kickstarter, and the first thing I ask anyone who's about to do a campaign is, find individuals who have done similar things to you and see what they did. Just look what they're offering, look at their profile, look how they presented their opportunity, and use that as a baseline to create your profile. The best way is just, don't recreate the wheel, just find what other people have done that's successful, and suddenly you could replicate it.
And just a quick question, but do you envision crowdfunding starting to be channel specific, like consumer packaged goods, technology, or is that already happening?
The only way to compete against Kickstarter and Indiegogo is to be specific. If you want to get into the business of creating a crowdfunding platform, to me, you should dominate a niche and become the authority in that niche and provide ancillary services because you know that. That's the best way to get into the business now, unless you have millions of dollars to compete with the big players. I mean, Richard Branson just invested, I think, $40 million into Indiegogo. I mean, Google announced the other day that they're going to incorporate crowdfunding into the YouTube power users. This isn't going away. If these big players are coming in, they see this as the future.
They smell money.
They smell it. Everyone's, people are starting to smell it.
Can I ask you just very quickly?
Sure.
How does UC Berkeley use this funding model?
UC Berkeley is actually a research institute. So Dr. Richard Swart, and if you'd like me to introduce you to him, he runs that institution. He is part of Crowdfund Capital Advisors, and they were the guys who really brought the legislation to the Jobs Act to actually Congress and the Senate. I can actually have them come speak at UConn if you want. They were on my show, which I'll explain. The guys from Crowdfund Capital. I mean, allow me to be a resource for you guys. I really would want to help you in any way I can. You're my alma mater too, and I want to help in any way I can. So yes, I will introduce you to anyone you need to. Any other questions? Yes.
The cost of the services, either you're providing or the other crowdfunding mechanisms, do they have a variety of fees where it's front-end loaded, back-end loaded, set margins? Can you address that?
People are being innovative, especially startups that are trying to be funding portals. Kickstarter and Indiegogo model is just percentage of the money raised. So it's like a percentage of the money raised. On the equity side, you have some people who have this database of accredited investors, and in my opinion, I don't think this is right. I mean, it's a way to make money, but I don't think it's going to be a benefit to people who pay. But like seedinvest.com, they have a do-it-yourself model or a we'll promote your project for you. The do-it-yourself model, they're saying, I have 3,000 accredited investors, pay me $300 a month to network with them. I don't think that's going to be valuable for many people. They're just trying to find a way to survive. That's my opinion. I mean, that's kind of like snake oil salesman type stuff. I mean, I'm trying to get them as my client, by the way, but I see this. I see the 360-degree view of this because I've had to network with everyone, and I know that most people would not benefit by paying $300 a month for only 3,000 investors. That's not a lot of people, but some people will be. It'll be sold to say, yeah, these guys will fund your deal, pay $300 a month, do it yourself. Like, no, that's not the right way to do business. It's a way to make money. It's just not the right way to do business, in my opinion. Did that answer your question? People are coming up with ancillary services, and I'll explain what one of my clients does to